Yesterday I was talking about white supremacy and my definition of white supremacism. And I'm saying that there are two ways of defining white supremacist. It is someone who just doesn't want to become a second-class citizen or a minority in his own white homeland. Or it could be someone who thinks his magic white skin should be enough to protect him from other white people and his corrupt and incompetent ruling classes. So you can have you have a choice of both definitions. So what kind of white supremacist do you want to be? Do you want to be the kind who says, "Oh, right, I'm just the kind of white supremacist who doesn't want to become a minority and a second-class citizen in my own white homeland," or I am the kind of white supremacist who thinks my magic white skin is enough to protect me from my incompetent ruling classes and other white people who are criminal and do not mean me well. And if I find that my magic white skin isn't working to protect me against other white people and my own incompetent and corrupt ruling classes, I'm just going to blame the Jews and the Muslims and the foreigners and the other races. So what kind of white supremacist are you? I am also implying that if you're not prepared to consider that your problem may be because your Christo-liberalism has failed, then you're obviously a white supremacist. Because you're saying, my magic white skin is enough. I don't need no religion. And if there's anything wrong with my race being my religion, I'll just blame the Jews and Muslims, who, interestingly, have a religion, which I don't have, but I'm going to blame them for somehow subverting my society because I don't have a religion, even though I don't have a religion. So this would be the equivalent of somebody turning up in the live chat and finding that everyone else has a blue wrench, but they don't. So everyone has a protected characteristic and has a blue wrench, and you, as a white person, do not. So yes, you could blame the Jews if you want, and the Muslims, but it doesn't really help, does it, to keep blaming the Jews and the Muslims and the Illuminati and the Masons and the people you usually blame. Morgoth has just posted his Substack piece about Nigel Farage being bullied by Sajid Javid because Farage has tweeted that it was a bad thing that what was it? What was he saying? Let me just find it. He was saying in his piece entitled "White Minorities, Enoch Powell and So What?" So the story is that Nigel Farage tweeted, "According to the ONS figures, London, Manchester and Birmingham are now all white minority white cities." And Sajid Javid said, "So what?" And I don't know why Nigel Farage said he doesn't say anything, apparently. And Morgoth, who is an ethno-nationalist, said, oh, well, you can't say anything now, but, we know that Nigel Farage really, is really deep down an ethno-nationalist, because he obviously minds that these cities of Britain, London, Manchester, and Birmingham, are now all white minority cities, and he's obviously tweeting that it's a bad thing, and Sergeant Javed is bullying him and saying he might possibly be racist for complaining about London, Manchester, and Birmingham becoming white minority cities. So what is a white supremacist to do? Keo says, stop saying white. Use English instead. It's more accurate. Maybe you don't like me using white because it's a taboo word and it's all embarrassing and so racial. And English, it just sounds less racial, I suppose. But even talking about the English is controversial because we don't know yet. It's not official yet whether being English means you have to be white, because there was this perception that you can only be English if you're white. And if you've been listening to the football commentary in the England and Iran match, there are all these goals being scored by these footballers who were Englishmen, apparently, but they were non-white. So I think, Keo, if you're asking me to do the same thing and say everyone who lives in England is an Englishman, you would just be confusing the issue. I think I'm using the right word. I am talking about race. And we are talking about race. And I am talking about Nigel Farage, obviously, showing concern that Manchester, London, and Birmingham are now white minority cities. So the next question is it wrong to be concerned? That is a question, isn't it? And basically, Sajid Javed is saying to Nigel Farage, you're racist if you complain. You're racist and you're a white supremacist for complaining. So are you being racist and white supremacist for complaining? Wouldn't any race be a little concerned? I mean, okay, let's pretend we're not talking about the West or any Western nation. Let's just say, there's these Africans in an African country, and suddenly they realize, there's an awful lot of white people in our country, and all our cities. They're no longer black majority. They used to be, but now they're no longer black majority cities, and we don't know. We can't quite describe why we're so upset and concerned and anxious and distressed, and we just want to. Well, we just are concerned. I mean, we can't. Because we're not very good with words, or there's so many words we can't use, like white or race. There's just too many taboos put in language now that we can't discuss, and it's really upsetting us, and we just don't know what to do, and we don't even know how to express ourselves without being bullied by Sajid Javed and the lefties. So I guess you are in a bit of trouble, aren't you? I mean, my entire position is that if you think that your magic white skin is going to protect you from the incompetence and corruption of your own ruling classes, who clearly don't care about you, and are happy to let all these things happen to your cities and just shrug their shoulders and shut you up for daring to complain, then just you're welcome to it. Your race can be your religion. I'm not stopping you. I can't stop you from saying, my race is my religion. You have your Christianity and your Christian nationalism, so go for it. What's your problem? You don't need me to tell you that you need a better moral system that will give the what shall I call you? The dominant group, the dominant culture. You're still the majority. I think. Well, what is it? 80% now. Used to be 86% in. What was it? So in 2011, 86% of Britons were white, and now there's only 81%. Drop of 4.3% in 10 years. So people identifying as white British in 2001 was 87.5%, in 2011 it was 80%, in 2021 it's only 74.4%. What's happening? But it's fine. Our race is our religion. We don't need no moral system. God forbid you don't need a religion. Everything's just fine. And if it's not, you can just, go back to your Christian nationalism, right? Hi, Frank. Is that... Yes, I'm well, thank you. Is that a problem to be a minority? Well, the thing is, for us minorities, I'm a minority, you're a minority. We're used to it, right? It's what you're accustomed to, frankly. Because if you've always been a minority, it's just not a big deal. I mean, what are you complaining about? Everything's fine. But I guess if you're not, then you think, something's happening, and I'm not happy about it, and I don't even know how to express it in words without some big non-white bully jumping on me and calling me a white supremacist. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So Frank says it's natural progress, and I've got somebody with an unpronounceable Gaelic name to say that you're saying secular Quranism is Jewish. Well, I want the Jews to say that secular Quranism is to be ranked with Islam, which is the most no-hide religion, and obviously I want rabbis to rank all the four Gentile religions, ranking Islam most no-hide and Christianity least no-hide. So that's their role in the matter. That's all I want them to do, and then they will be discharged from their religious obligation. I mean, that's all I want from them. I don't need them to do any more. But they won't do what I say, because I guess they're saying, well, I can't make them do it, and B, that they're going to be saying, oh, it's dangerous. We don't want to be offending the Christians, because you know what they did to us the last time with all their pogroms and their inquisitions. What you propose is dangerous for us, so we ain't doing it. But I think minorities in America, Frank is black, are also a bit concerned about Muslim immigration. I mean, it's just that, even if you're a minority, you think, well, I mean, there are a lot of changes. I can see all the people looking different to what they were maybe 10, 20 years ago, and I find it disturbing, and I blah, 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 because actually a lot of Black Muslim Americans are complaining about immigrant Muslims taking over their American brand of Islam and just lording it over them and say, you haven't been Muslim for a very long time. We're more Muslim than you. We've been Muslim for centuries, and you've just been Muslim since Malcolm X or something like that. or Muhammad Ali, and we don't respect you because you're just, well, you know, and I guess even non-whites in the West are feeling a bit discombobulated, and I have noticed too that some black people are just sort of seeking an identity. I mean, this is something I've noticed with black Americans. It's like, oh, we've got to somehow distinguish ourselves from all these sort of black people that weren't born in this country. We're going to call ourselves ADOS, I think. What's it called? African descendants of slaves. Right. So it's something that sounds like Adidas, but anyway, it's ADOS, and this is how black people in America want to distinguish themselves from, other black people who've just come off, fresh off the boat or something. It's a way for, blacks who've been in America for centuries to say, well, we're not Nigerians who've just come off the boat, or Ghanaians, or, whatever, or Jamaicans. We've been here for longer than they have, and we kind of need to make them know that we've been here for longer than they do. And I think even people who are not white living in America are kind of feeling the chill. It's like, well, what's happening? Or what's going on? And also, I think the reason that these non-whites in the West are feeling a little discombobulated is I suspect, I mean, as has been happening to me too, you talk to your relations, and they look upon you with a kind of, pity and contempt, and it's like, well, what are they doing? What's your government doing? What does it think it's doing? Is it stupid? Is it crazy? Is it evil? Which is it? Why are they doing their crazy, stupid things? And you have no answer. I mean, what can you say? I say a lot of things, but I guess, other people who are not as politically engaged as me, as engaged as me, probably don't know what to say. It's like, are we being pitied? We thought we were, going to a good place by living in the West, and now we are being pitied and treated with contempt by the people back home. What's going on? So I think we're kind of all in the same boat. I'm saying you have to use secular Quranism if you want to unite under the banner of social conservatism, because secular Quranism is intended for non-Muslims of all races and religions, to say, no, we're not going to have any more of this matriarchy, this degenerate matriarchy, and we're going to restore patriarchy through reviving the practice of social conservatism. And social conservatism is all about marrying before you have children, and treating unmarried parents as sex offenders. And if you can sign up to that, and encourage others to sign up to that would be good. Perhaps you'll have a word with Morgoth and ask him if he's prepared to support what I proposed. I'm saying this is a problem. 50 years of feminism have destroyed 250 years of liberalism and 2,000 years of Christianity. I mean, you just... So in a way, it makes very clear how powerful and important the institution of marriage is. So, if you didn't have feminism, then marriage wouldn't be undermined. And if it weren't undermined, you'd still have your patriarchy. And under patriarchy, you would have a government that prioritizes the preferences of married parents who want to properly parent their legitimate offspring. But as it is, you have a matriarchy which is a society prioritizing the preferences of unmarried parents who casually conceived and casually parented their illegitimate offspring. So there you have it. Obviously patriarchy is going to be more efficient than matriarchy in dealing with its internal and external enemies. So that is your problem in a nutshell, and the way to solve your problem is to, as the Americans say, eat crow, and say, well, we're going to admit that 50 years of feminism was wrong and it has destroyed Western civilization as we know it. I'm not even going to promise you, like, oh, I'm going to save Western civilization as we know it. I'm saying that even if Western civilization is saved, Western civilization as we know it will end, because secular Quranism is, well, obviously, it will be based on a different holy book of a totally different religion. But here the American Republic is just as key piece of the machinery, shall we say. So I'm saying that the founding fathers meant to reject Christianity in order to reject monarchy, or meant to reject monarchy in order to reject Christianity. It doesn't really matter which, but I'm saying that the American Republic was built on Islamic foundation. So the First Amendment was based on chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran. And I'm saying it has to be the Quran because we already know that Jews never enjoyed freedom of belief. Because we know that according to the Torah, idolatry and blasphemy attracted the death penalty for Jews. That's what it says. You can go look it up if you don't believe me. And we also know that Christianity, when it was operating at full throttle, had the practice of burning heretics at the stake. And its purpose was to support the divine right of kings, and Christianity began in the Roman Empire, but it failed to prevent the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. But since there was nothing else around, when Rome fell, the barbarian kings of Europe accepted the bargain of the Catholic Church and became Christian monarchs, using Christianity to support their divine right to rule. And this went all right for a bit until the Reformation, and the Reformation was basically these no longer barbarian kings who started, well, who had been learning, Greek and Latin and knew how to write and read, and they eventually had a few ideas of their own about how to rule their kingdom, and they didn't like the Pope telling them what to do and whom they could or couldn't marry, and they basically rebelled. And that was basically what the Wars of the Reformation was all about. So maybe a lot of you don't know much about the detail of the Wars of the Reformation, which went on for hundreds of years. But anyway, there was the war called the 30 Years' War, and it was immensely destructive, and millions of Europeans died. I can't remember exactly how many, but the most telling detail of it was that it was so bad. It was so terrible that Europeans were excused their practice of cannibalism. So it was pretty bad, wasn't it? Yeah, it was pretty bad. And I suppose after the wars of the Reformation, the Europeans were thinking, what the hell was that all about? It was terrible, terrible. We had a terrible time. We'll become enlightened now. Let's enter into the age of enlightenment. And that was basically what it was all about. And you have all these ideas of empiricism, and empiricism was basically a kind of, I'll believe it when I see it. And they use this principle to question God's existence. It's like, well, I mean, how do we know God exists? We could be, well, we could have killed ourselves over nothing at all for, over these terrible wars of the Reformation. What the hell was that about? We don't even know. So I guess the Europeans thought and thought and thought, and then, quite a few of them crossed the Atlantic and discovered America, or settled in America. And then they had their revolution, and the revolution was instigated by the founding fathers, who were men of the Enlightenment and had a few ideas of their own about whether they should be forced to pretend to be Christian, because in the old world, they had to toe the line of following the religion of their absolute monarch. They didn't really have a choice about whether to be Christian or not. I mean, it wasn't like the monarch was saying, "Oh, would you like to follow my religion, please?" They were just saying, if you don't follow the religion of the monarch, they will burn you at the stake. And that was what all these, well, you know about the Christian practice of burning heretics at the stake. So you can understand why the founding fathers objected to this and said, no, we're not going to have this sort of thing in the New World. We don't want that kind of shit happening in our country, because it was terrible when it happened in Europe, and we're just not having it anymore. Anyway, as far as the Americans are concerned, the First Amendment was based on Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, which says there is no compulsion in belief, truth stands clear from error. And as I was saying earlier, Jews enjoyed no freedom of belief when they were living in Israel. And Christians never enjoyed any freedom of belief, and there's nothing in the New Testament that gives anyone any rights at all, because it's all a bunch of silly stories and stuff Paul said about how to become Christian. But who the hell was Paul anyway? Well, why should anyone listen to him? Anyway, they did, and Christianity was Paul's kind of Christianity, and Paul was a Jew. So I'm saying that the only scripture that even mentions freedom of belief is the Quran. And I'm saying Jefferson owned a Quran. In fact, he owned two, because he bought a second copy when his first copy was destroyed in a fire in his library. So obviously it meant something to him. It's not just a book, that he bought and never read. I mean, we all have books that we buy and never read, don't we? I have. But what's more interesting about Jefferson's Quran is, it's like, he obviously valued it, and, the history, American history says Jefferson read the Quran in order to better negotiate with the Barbary pirates. And and it's even on record that he bought the George Sale translation of the Quran from some New England bookshop whose name I can't remember now. But anyway, this is all recorded in some detail. So we know that Jefferson was interested in these matters, and he wasn't the only one. There were lots of people who used the fact that they were far away from England to talk about these matters that they wouldn't have been allowed to talk about if they were still in the old world. Because the whole point of using Christianity as to support the divine right of monarchs to rule is to give them authority to do whatever they like to their subjects. Now, Jews were allowed, officially anyway, they were allowed to be Jews because, however much the Christians hated Jews for not being Christians, they had to acknowledge that, in the convoluted history of Christianity, Jesus was a Jew and Christians were supposed to worship him as a co-equal of the supreme and eternal Abrahamic God who created the universe. So possibly Jews in Europe are resented for being allowed their religion, while Gentile subjects of European Christian monarchs were not. So this would explain the ancestral hatreds that Christians always felt for Jews, that they were, somehow more privileged than they were because they were allowed their religion. Well, they could not have a religion of their own. It had to be the king's religion. And it seems a shame when you think, 1,400 years ago, there was already Islam. But I guess, these kings couldn't bring themselves to acknowledge that maybe they'd been duped by these Christian missionaries from the Vatican. But we know there have been a few problems with English monarchs. We know that Henry II threatened to convert to Islam when he was really, really, really fed up with the Pope. Henry II was the one who said, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest," referring to Thomas à Becket, who was murdered in the cathedral. So this some of you may have heard of it. It was Canterbury Cathedral that Thomas à Becket was murdered in by knights who, and the story goes that they heard Henry, probably saying, "Oh, well, no one get rid me of this turbulent priest." And these knights said, "Well, we will." And so they hunted Thomas à Becket down, and he ran into Canterbury Cathedral, and and he was slain by these two knights. So that's the story. But later, Henry II said, "Oh, well, I'm sorry." And he wore sackcloth and ashes. And the problem he had with Thomas à Becket was that he was sort of being too Catholic and following the orders of the Pope too much and giving him jip. And after he died, after Henry II died, there was King John, and King John was rumoured to have made some sort of bargain with some Muslim ruler, saying that if you lend me arms and I defeat my enemies, I will convert to Islam, and then you'll get an English kingdom full of Muslims. But he never really dared, because I suppose all these kings thought, well, although technically I have the right to do it, they probably anticipated that their own subjects would rise up against them and behead them, and they thought, better not. So that is basically what I know of how English kings dealt with Islam. They saw it as a way of getting even with the Pope, but they dared not quite use it. And I'm saying, well, the time has come around again. It's like, hey, there it is. There's your solution. And of course, there's your pride in the way. Making you reject what I say and pretend it's not true. So Frank is saying, I understand where you're coming from when you say feminism has destroyed the West, but women deserve equal rights to men. The ability to work and make the same and vote are very important. Well, this is where I disagree with you, because women do not think in the same way as men. I mean, I know I'm a noble exception, but I also know my own sex, and eventually they will be given all the feminine excuses, and that that is traditionally what they are allowed. So it's like, oh, it's my period. Oh, I'm a bit stupid and emotional, and you have to excuse my craziness at certain times of the month and all that. And you have to agree that it's true. They do get a bit emotional around their periods, and then they can't think straight, and they get into a bad mood, and they just don't see things in the same way that you do. And if you allow them to boss you around in the workplace, they just won't see things in the same way as you do. And I also know that women are just sort of less racist than men, because as far as women are concerned, they see foreign men coming into their country, and they think, oh yay, I mean more men for us. While men, when they see that, they think, oh, that's competition for us. But I also know that there are men who actively invite cheap immigrant labor to come into the country, but then they would be men, or wealthy men who run businesses, saying, well, we want cheap labor, and the locals are no good, and therefore I have to use cheaper immigrant labor. So it's all a matter of perspective. It depends on whether you are working class or middle class. And obviously, race is not the only thing that would, that decides everything, because that there are also, there's class conflict, and, bad gender relations, and the generation gap, and all kinds of things that might not make you treat your own people well. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that race is not the thing that will. Oh, what am I trying to say? I'm saying that just because you are the same race doesn't mean that the person you're dealing with will automatically be your friend. Because when you think about, Europe, monoracial, all Christian, and wars of the Reformation. And then you think of, oh, these white people who settled in America. It's like, what did they do? They went and had a civil war with each other, and then they had the Spanish-American War. So it's like, yeah, all these Europeans, they don't really get on with each other, do they, with their Christianity? And I'm afraid there is a reason why Europeans are so warlike. It's their religion. I mean, you have to attribute some part of their character, their nature to their religion. So if they're very warlike, it's because of their religion. I mean, they fight each other at the drop of a hat, and then they try to leave their Christianity behind, but they can't do it. So we already know that Christians started 2 world wars, and if there's a 3rd world war, it will be Christians fighting it again. And After that, the reputation of Christians and Europeans will be mud, because they'll be known as the terrible warlike people with their crazy religion that they don't even believe in, starting 3 world wars, and then they'll be forced to use Islam. You know. So I'm saying, why not jump before you're pushed? I think I know that Frank, would like his wife to work. And I'm saying, yes, I understand. You think, oh, I don't think I'll be able to earn enough to support a wife and family. And traditionally, it was so arranged that married men, or enough of them anyway, could earn enough money to support a wife and family. And that was how the West was run until equal opportunity and equal pay and all that. Now, obviously, somebody has to make a sacrifice for this. But maybe if you ask women, it's like, come on, if you could just be a housewife and have only one boss, i.e., your husband, and have children, is this what you'd rather do than go to the office and work for people you hate in a job you hate? Maybe think about it. And I know if you ask young women, it's like, yeah, they want to go to work, they want to have, meet their future husband at work, and they won't be supporting this proposal. But how about asking women who are no longer of childbearing age to be honest about whether they have any regrets in their life. I mean, maybe some of them will actually say, well, the greatest regret of my life is that I'm not a mother, and and it's too late now. Maybe a few of them are prepared. I mean, I was very heartened to meet somebody who was actually prepared to admit it, for the sake of her race. She was prepared to admit that was what happened to her, and she was prepared to admit that it didn't go that well for her, but just so that she could at least warn other women of her race not to go where she'd been. But in order to rearrange society in a way that allows men to earn more than women, I mean, this is what it would mean, the abolition of equal pay. But that actually wouldn't be against liberal or libertarian principles, because if you want to codify liberalism, and I have done that for the sake of your convenience, I would say liberalism, if it means anything at all, would be freedom of expression, freedom of belief, freedom of association, freedom of contract, and the right to property. So freedom of contract would mean that you have the right to make a contract with anyone. If they're prepared to accept, what you're offering them, then it's their business. It's only the business of the parties to the contract. So if somebody accepts a contract to be paid for, paid whatever, and then they later discover that somebody else doing the same job is paid, who is a member of the opposite sex, I mean, who is a man, is being paid more, and they want to make a fuss about it. It's like, well, too bad. I mean, you don't like it, you can, off you go. If you can find, another employer who's prepared to give you, So if you want things to go back to the good old days, you would have to accept how the sacrifices that people made in the good old days. They had to, well, not have sex before marriage and stay together for the sake of the children, even they become bored and irritated with each other. Women had to accept that they would have to quit their job when they got married because they had stuff to be doing at home. I mean, it's not that they can't do anything. If they're creative, they can run a shop, they can run a business from home. There's all sorts of things that they could be doing at home if that's what they want to do. So, this is all within the ambit of what the Quran allows. The Quran does support freedom of contract and freedom of belief and the right to free speech because it is the basis of the First Amendment. And it does talk about property and how to enter somebody how to what's the word? You have to have strict rules about entering somebody's property and even your own property. It says don't come back, don't even come back into your own home without due warning. It's an interesting book, the Quran, and I do advise. I do hope people will read it, and I think the rules are fair enough. And if you don't like the way your country is going, I think it's because it has no rules. And what you're doing is, in effect, allowing your corrupt and incompetent politicians to make up the rules as they go along. And they've been doing it for centuries. They have been literally doing it for centuries. And we're now at the point of, well, you know what's happened, over our heads in debt. Something's going to give. Children are being told that it's acceptable to sterilize themselves to become a member of the opposite sex, or at any rate masquerade as a member of the opposite sex. We are given a lot of marriage substitutes to basically undermine the institution of marriage. And you need something radical to correct it. And I know a lot of my ideas are a bit scary. I mean, one-party theocracy and all that kind of thing. But I just don't see. I just don't see the point in pretending that you just have to vote for me and No, I'm not even going to participate in any elections because I think the whole thing should be scrapped. And I'm prepared to discuss it and answer questions about it. And I hope people will also talk about that they will be prepared to talk about it with me. So back to the point of back to Frank's point about equal rights. I'm saying it can be the greatest injustice to treat unequal things equally. So, do you think it's okay to make women eligible for the draft? If men get drafted into the army, why not women? I mean, you can make all kinds of arguments. I'm saying, no, I mean, there's just no point getting women to fight. I mean, you're putting them in danger. You're demoralizing the men. And you are actually making you're actually undermining military efficiency. The ability to work and make the same. Okay, so I don't agree with you with equal pay. I'm saying women do have valuable work to do, and it won't be paid for because they should just do it in the home and do it for family members, which actually I understand a lot of women don't want to do it. But I mean, there are lots of men who don't want to do men's work either. It's like, well, I don't want to be drafted. I don't want to do, a lot of, probably a lot of men don't want to marry either. And in a way, you can understand why people don't want to get married, and that's why you have to privilege married parents over non-parents, and to treat unmarried parents as sex offenders. Just to make people aware of what it is that society expects them to do, and this is the only way that you can return to people being return to government to being to having saner policies that don't make you feel that the world's going mad. So that is basically what I mean to say. I hope it's been clear enough. Thank you all for listening.